Coming to you from the heart of the Diocese of Savannah, this is It's Catholic, Y'all, a series of conversations about faith and life. Views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily represent the views of the Diocese of Savannah.
Welcome to It's Catholic, Y'all. My name is Patrick Janelle. I'm the Director of Fellowship and Life at the Diocese of Savannah. I'm here at the Cathedral Basilica of St. John the Baptist in Savannah, and I'm joined by Father Damian Ference. Father Ference is Vicar of Evangelization for the Diocese of Cleveland, Ohio. He serves at Borromeo Seminary in Wycliffe, Ohio. Hope I said that right.
You did.
As Director of Human Formation, Assistant Professor of Philosophy. He's written for Word on Fire, America, Commonweal, Dappled Things, First Things, Catholic Universe Bulletin, and many others. Ference is a lifetime member of the Flannery O'Connor Society and is the author of Understanding the Hillbilly, Thomist, the Philosophical Foundation of Flannery O'Connor's Narrative Art. He's a Thomistic scholar, a Flannery scholar, and he is here in Savannah for the weekend to celebrate Flannery's 100th birthday. And I'm glad we can meet here at the parish where Flannery went to Mass. Welcome, Father.
Thank you, Patrick. It's wonderful to be on here. I'm so excited, not just to be on this podcast, but to be on this podcast in the crypt church of Flannery's childhood.
I'm very excited to have you here because you are a scholar of Flannery O'Connor, and this is her home diocese. And so one of the things that I'm very eager to know and learn about and think about is how, as a member of the Office of Evangelization, we can utilize, a great gift that it seems for our diocese.
Mm-hmm.
If you out in Ohio are utilizing her as a kind of tool of evangelization, it seems like we should be inspired by that and doing it. But to begin, Father, many of the people listening might not be familiar with you and who you are. So can you tell us a little bit about you, how maybe some of your vocation story, how you became a priest?
So I never thought much of being a priest as a child. It wasn't until my senior year of high school that I say I was always friends with Jesus. I knew who he was, but he wasn't at the center of my life until probably my senior year of high school. Before that, I come from a very blue-collar family. My dad was an elevator mechanic. My uncles and cousins were mostly firemen, policemen, post office workers, car mechanics. So that was the route I was heading. But something happened my senior year of high school, got more into my faith. I was really having an intellectual conversion, which led to the conversion of the heart. I thought I'd go off to college, a small Catholic college, maybe play baseball, study theology. And then something happened that summer where I felt for the first time in my life that I was being called to consider seminary by the Lord. And I thought it was so funny. And I thought, I like priests, they're good, but I never thought for myself that would be my future. But I talked to my high school chaplain. He said, well, let's go to the seminary, check it out. It was the end of July, first week of August, so we had very little time. But went through the psychologicals, I got accepted, and then 9 years later, I was ordained a priest. And there's a lot that could fill out those 9 years too. But it was during my time in the seminary that I came upon O'Connor. Maybe we could get into that in another question, but I was ordained in 2003, parish priest for 4 years, studied at Catholic U for 2, I have a licentiate in philosophy, and then I taught at the seminary full-time for 9 years, back to studies in Rome for 3. That's where I wrote the dissertation that turned into that book. And then when I came back to Cleveland, I thought I was going to be seminary full-time again, but my new bishop came and he made me the first vicar for evangelization in the Diocese of Cleveland. So I didn't even know I didn't know what a vicar was, embarrassingly. And people were asking me in Rome, they're like, dude, are you an Episcopal vicar? I'm like, I don't know. So I emailed the bishop, I'm like, am I an Episcopal vicar? He's like, yes. I'm like, oh, okay. And then the evangelization stuff, I've been going at it now for about 3.5 years. And for a while, I was also secretary for parish life. But I told you before the show started, that was a lot heavy administration for me, which I did, but they're combining some offices now. So for the first time since 2007, I'm also going to be able to do some parish work, which I'm very excited about. So I'll be I'll be parochial vicar at our cathedral downtown. And I'm super excited about that because I love preaching, I love teaching, I love visiting the sick, I love funerals and weddings. Funerals, weddings, baptisms, by the way, are great places to evangelize because you get people in church who normally don't come to church. Anyway, and I'm in Georgia this weekend because I love Flannery. And last night I was at a little social at her childhood home. Tonight I'm going to some brewery where they're doing a fundraiser. And then Monday and Tuesday I'll be in Milledgeville for a couple talks. at the parish there, visit the farm, and celebrate her 100th birthday on Tuesday, March 25th. It's significant. Flannery was born on the feast of the Annunciation because it's a very incarnational feast day, and her art was surely incarnational.
And is this your first time visiting the house?
I've been on 3, 4, 5, probably about 5 or 6 Flannery O'Connor pilgrimages. And a full pilgrimage is Savannah and Milledgeville, and even Atlanta, because the Dominican Sisters of Hawthorne have a cancer home there. Mm-hmm. And that's a story too, for you. We'll get there, I'm sure.
Okay, because the book is dedicated to
yes, it is.
Sister, isn't it?
Yes,
okay.
it is.
Okay, well, we'll make sure we get there. So, Father, something you just mentioned that seminary came before Flannery in your life.
Yeah.
If that's a way of kind of phrasing vocations there. How did the interest in Flannery O'Connor come up? What was the first encounter?
So I heard the name Flannery O'Connor because I knew that Bruce Springsteen was influenced by Flannery O'Connor. Okay. And I've been a Springsteen fan almost my whole life. Like since I was 4 years old was when I had my first album, because I had an older brother and a cousin who got me into music early. But my senior year at seminary, now our seminary in Cleveland, Borromeo, we partner with John Carroll University. We have our own philosophy department, but for the rest of the courses, the seminarians go to main campus. And I took a course with a poet named George Bilgere, and he's a wonderful man, Bilgere. And it was a poetry workshop. So every week we would have to write as students, or a table maybe just a little bigger than this, 2 original poems every week. Okay. And then he would pick one, and then we would workshop that one. And one week he picked my poem, and he said, Damian's poem reminds me of Flannery O'Connor. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I got out my pen and I wrote Flannery O'Connor, and I thought I had to figure out who this guy is when I get home. Well, sure enough, this guy was a gal. Yeah. And her name, baptismal name, was Mary Flannery O'Connor, which she kept until she graduated from Georgia College and then went up to Iowa and dropped it so people wouldn't hold the fact that she was a woman against her as a writer. And so that's where it started. I read almost all of her short stories that summer of 1998. And then I got into her letters, Habit of Being. I got into her essays, Mystery and Manners. But actually, when I dove into her letters, like full tilt, was this academic year of 2000, 2001. And the reason I remember that is because I was on internship, and it was also the year that my mother was dying of cancer. And she was in a cancer home in Cleveland, Ohio, that was run by the Hawthorne Dominican Sisters. So I'm reading Habit of Being, and Flannery keeps writing about this mother evangelist. So I come in, see my mom. I saw my mom almost every day. It wasn't too far from the parish I was interning at. And I said, Sister Kevin, I'm reading a book. And Flannery, I didn't say Flannery, I said, and Mother Evangelist keeps coming up. She goes, who are you reading, Flannery? She was from New York. And I said, yeah, how did you know? She goes, oh, I knew her. Like, you knew her? She said, yeah, when I was a young nun, I was assigned to Our Lady of Perpetual Help home in Atlanta, Georgia. And there were not many Catholics in the South at that time. And that was only 86 miles from Milledgeville. And so O'Connor befriended the Hawthorne Dominican Sisters, specifically because they had a case that they thought was miraculous, a girl named Marianne who they received when she was very young, maybe 2 years old. And she was supposed to die, but she lived to be 14. Wow. And one of the Mother Superior wrote a little book and she wanted Flannery to write it. Flannery said, no, you write it. I'll write the foreword. And Intro to Memoir to Marianne's actually the last essay in Mystery and Manners. So long story short, the nun who took care of my mother knew Flannery O'Connor. And then Sister Benedict, who was in the next ward down the hall, was taking care of a woman named Mrs. Cordis. 2 years later, I was ordained a priest. I was assigned to St. Mary's Church in Hudson, Ohio. And Father Cordis, whose mother was down the hall dying of cancer while my mom was also taken care of by a nun who knew Flannery. So I say that she's been following me. Wow. And kind of calling me. The way that, people say saints kind of pick you don't pick them. Yeah. And I know she's not canonized, but I think there's good reason to believe she's in the promised land and doing good work from there. So I feel like I've had a vocation within my vocation of priesthood to promote her work and to help explain her work and to help people understand it. Because that's one of the first questions I get. Where do I start? And I've read her stories and I don't like them. I don't know how to understand them. So that's part of my job, I think.
I'm very appreciative of you. I've read your book. I've watched, I don't know if they're still on there, but you had a series on Pints with Aquinas where you broke apart, like under the paywall, behind the paywall.
I did, yeah. Well, what was cool was before Matt Fradd on Pints with Aquinas went on to the video, he started off with a podcast. And I remember being on some of those early episodes where you literally had to drink a beer while you're talking to him. And I remember doing a podcast with him. And then when I was studying in Rome, I'm working on this dissertation. He said, could you do a course on O'Connor's work? Because some of his listeners wanted it. And I said, sure, because that would actually help me do my research to write the dissertation, which I knew eventually I'd publish as part of a book or a book. And so, I did some of those stories there, and then some of that fruit wound up in my book.
I want to try to break apart the concept of storytelling a little bit and story with you, because I want to say this might be typical of Catholics, but it's been my experience, and I know a lot of Catholics who seem similar to me, that I, started practicing the faith late high school, early college. I even have an academic background in the faith, in like theology and philosophy. So I would consider myself decently, capable in the areas of thinking as a Catholic. But the first time I read through Flannery O'Connor stories, I was like, what the heck is going on? Mm-hmm. I felt like one of the ladies she talks about is like, can't you just write a happier story? Mm-hmm. Reading these since 98, you said? Mm-hmm. Are you still enjoying reading the same stories?
I had Mass this morning or this afternoon at noon. You pray the Angelus at the beginning up there. The gospel today was the story of the prodigal son. Does that ever get old?
No.
Why? Because it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you understand something about it, when something is true and it's good and it's beautiful, it's mysterious and you never solve whatever that thing is. The more you encounter that thing, the more it solves you. And I'm not saying O'Connor's work is scripture, but I am saying that it's good, beautiful, and true. Yeah. And that like the Catholic Mass or like baseball, you guys have the Savannah Bananas down here?
That's right.
They came to Cleveland last year. I went. They're they're like the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. They're really good. Well, I tell people O'Connor is like baseball or like a high Mass, a good Catholic liturgy, in that if you don't know anything about baseball and you don't know anything about the Mass, if you go to a baseball game or if you go to the Mass, even if you don't understand what's going on, you'll know there's something happening there that's important and that you'll desire to know more about it because of the way that people are responding and the ritual taking place in there. Yeah. I think O'Connor's stories, her fiction, whether it's short stories or novels, are the same way in that when you first start, you may say, I don't understand it, but I know there's something here I'm supposed to be getting. Yeah. And people can say that when they go to Mass or a baseball game. That guy just hit that ball and someone ran this way and slid. I don't know what all that means, but there's something there, and I want to know more about it. I think it's something like that, to speak analogously.
You tying it to the scriptures is helpful because as I feel like, and it's been the same with music, and I want to ask you some questions with music, but like getting into the world of stories, the narrative art. I feel like I've needed someone kind of holding my hand, and it's like the scriptures seem like, okay, this is good because it's the scriptures, it's the word of God. And you're right, like something's happening. Someone like Flannery O'Connor or Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings, there's a sense that they are time-tested almost, and a lot of smart Catholic people I trust like them.
Yeah. Her command of the language, her ability to show and not tell. And I think that could be a difference. So you say, well, I know philosophy and I know theology. You can know the scriptures and you can know the catechism, but and those are very important things to know, by the way, but part of what it means to be Catholic is that stuff becomes who you are. Yeah. It's not simply head knowledge that you report. It's actually knowledge that becomes part of your being. So you don't just know that that host up there is the body, blood, soul, divinity of Jesus, but you believe it in such a manner that when you receive it, you allow him to become part of you and you become part of him, and it's transformative. So in your study of philosophy, did you ever read the classic text After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre? Okay. So in there he has this, it's either chapter 14 or 15 when he's going through like Aristotle and the whole virtue ethics thing. He talks about human beings being storytelling animals. That's what we do. And you understand yourself as having a story. And when you meet someone, everybody has a story. And so for Catholic Christians, like the story is the story of like God creating, and we're part of his creation, the best part, made in his image and likeness. We fall, we are redeemed. And then if we accept that redemption, then we're part of God's life moving forward. It's a whole kerygma, right? So that's attractive. And she is, in her fiction, focusing in on stories of grace, but mostly to a world and characters that are depraved of grace, So I was at the house last night and we were chatting about how do you know you're understanding O'Connor if you're really getting her? And I think there's two ways. One, if you laugh, like if you're reading her stories and you're finding them funny, good. That means you're understanding them. It's kind of like if you're learning a new language and you know you're getting the language when you kind of get the humor. Mm-hmm. So same is true with O'Connor. If you're not laughing at all and you don't think it's funny, you're not getting it. It's like Coen brothers do something similar in their films that she does in her fiction. Like the violence is made to wake you up. It's not violence for violence sake. It's to kind of open your heart so God can move. And then secondly, when you come across a character that you do not like the grandmother in Good Man's Hard to Find, or Mrs. Turpin in Revelation, or you name the character. When there is a character in there that you do not like, and then you come to the point when you realize, oh, that's me. Darn it. All right, I see what she's doing there. And like that could be the misfit, or that could be the grandmother, It could be Parker, it could be Sarah Ruth, it could be Harry's parents, it could be who knows. But when you're finding yourself in these characters that you despise, and O'Connor exposes your own need for grace, then you're getting it. Again, it's like the story of the prodigal son. Okay, we're like, oh, maybe I can see myself as that one at one time in my life I was like that, and now I came back to the Father. Good. But how many of us look at that older son when someone comes to Mass on Easter who hasn't been there all year and takes your pew, and we're like, oh, It's like, dude, they're in church, so calma, and let's see how we can navigate these waters.
So I read Displaced Person, and I laughed once. I mean, I specifically remember laughing and being like, oh, I'm surprised, But there was this interesting experience for me where at the beginning of the story, some of the characters, I was like, oh, these people are really annoying. And they remind me of people that I find annoying. But by the middle of the story, I was kind of feeling this interior unease of like, I know this is telling me something about myself. Like I was all of a sudden, they went from these outside people to like myself and my family members, like really quickly. I ended up spending a lot of the day kind of wrestling with the story, almost kind of shaking. Like I had this interior shakeup going on, and I was just trying to clarify, like, what does this mean? Yeah. But I'm still adjusting, and this doesn't need to be all directed to me, but I'm still adjusting with the scriptures. When you're like, what does this mean? You're like, well, Jesus said it, he's the eternal God. But it's interesting for me wrestling with a character like, is it Mrs. Shortley and Mr. Shortley? Yeah. And being like, what does this mean? And it's like, oh, it's just something Flannery O'Connor made up, but it's moving me inside.
Good. That's a sign of good art.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. So when you leave the art museum, or when you leave the theater after you've seen a good film, or close a book, and a scene or a character sits with you and you're wondering, what does this mean? And you're trying to figure that out. It's not like a math problem and then you solve it and you're like, get that. It is that somehow that's helping you solve the mystery of yourself, right? It's like I was listening to Bishop Barron's homily for this weekend, and it's the burning bush, and he's talking about how you can never grasp God, right? He's not the kind of thing. He's not one being among many. He's a sheer active being. And so you sit in that mystery, and in sitting in that mystery and trusting that something good, beautiful, and true is here, your heart's being solved and your mind's being solved, and you're growing in that process. But that is what I think good art ought to be able to do.
Does this same kind of process, I mean, I think you did just say like movies, like does that translate over into movies and music as well? Like,
I think so.
The same
Yeah.
thing can be happening?
Yeah.
It's not, it's funny. I was just the other day hearing you bring up Bruce Springsteen. I was at a Christopher West event the other day. And,
oh, cool. He's a Springsteen fan.
No, I was going to say Bruce Springsteen.
He likes you too more, but he's a Springsteen fan.
But Bruce Springsteen comes throughout a ton of the talk I was at. Like he keeps bringing up a song called Born to Run. Like I felt like a misfit because I never heard that song before.
The album turns 50 years old this year.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And the whole crowd, I mean, everybody else was singing the song when Christopher West said one part and everybody else sang it with him. So I was like, okay, I clearly need to go listen to this. I don't know if I've ever been someone who's paid attention to music as a storytelling art.
Oh.
When I was in high school and college, I listened to like hardcore music, so like metalcore. So I don't want to advertise, but bands like Under Oath or August Burns Red, The Devil Wears Prada. I mean, these are all, I mean, it's a very low underground, it's kind of more adjacent to like emo music, but it's just like screaming all the time, meaning there's no understanding of lyrics pretty much. And so
it's just more visceral.
It's just all visceral. It kind of like, I think it was Nietzsche who said that music can be the passions trying to experience themselves. And I think that's what this was, it's like, let's see what anger is like. Let's see what,
I studied under a guy at Catholic U. His name is Monsignor Robert Sokolowski. He's a phenomenologist. Okay. And he's a big Husserl guy. There is, phenomenology is trying to respond to something called, this is kind of nerdy, but the egocentric predicament goes back to Descartes, where you remember the whole I think therefore I am. Yes. Well, before he gets there, do you remember what he does before the cogito? It's the dubito. So he doubts everything, right? He doubts math, he doubts his senses, he doubts all these things. So his starting point of the world is just doubting everything. And then he can start to know certain things about, well, himself, I think, and then he could get out to God, then he could get to true and falsity, another proof for God, and then eventually the external world again. The problem is human beings don't live like that. We don't begin into the world by doubting everything. We actually start with belief in things. Phenomenology can teach us to do this, that we live in the world, we experience the world, we listen to music. I'm listening to a Taylor Swift album. You're listening to Bruce Springsteen. I'm listening to Gillian Welch. Fine. But then if you really want to know what's going on there, and this is what I would do, because I don't do it as much as I once did, but I used to review albums for Word on Fire, and I would take my CD, let's say like Taylor Swift's 1989, and I would go to the photocopy machine and I'd photocopy all the liner notes so I'd get all the lyrics, and then I'd go song by song and I would listen and I would analyze. So now I'm not just listening kind of background, not paying attention, but I'm bracketing each stanza of a lyric and I'm listening through it and I'm trying to figure out what she's saying. Not just in that song, but then how each song relates in terms of the whole album, which Taylor still writes concept albums, sort of Springsteen. And then once I get that, then I'm able to pull back and then say something about all of it. So I have friends, actually I'm connecting with a couple of them tomorrow in Atlanta, who are like, oh, I never listened to the lyrics that carefully. I'm like, what? Like, you have to listen to the lyrics that carefully because these artists are saying something, and it's important to know what they're saying and why they're saying it. That's why I so loved back in the day, VH1 used to be Video Hits 1 when they played music, like MTV used to play music. They used to have something called storytellers, and the artists would come on, they'd play a song, and then they'd unpack it and tell you why they wrote what they did and how they understand the thing, which is going back to Flannery. We get a lot of that in Habit of Being. So she writes these short stories, but we get to understand her take on them by her own letters and the things that she's said, or maybe in some of her essays. Can we find more in there? Sure. But I think it's always important to take the artist at his or her word for why he or she wrote what he or she did. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. So Springsteen on Storytellers, when Devils and Dust came out, he said somewhere in there, he said, he gives an analysis of a whole song and he'll say, did I know all that when I was writing that song? No. But did I feel it all? Yeah. So sometimes most of the time, the artistic intuition comes first. The muse hits and you're like, oh, I've got this idea, okay, I'm going with this. I put this out there. And then it's only after the fact that you're able to go back and you kind of knew what you were doing, but you'll even find deeper meaning in what you were doing, particularly if you're a Catholic artist, because if you're grounded in reality, which is what O'Connor was all about, like writing about the real and the particular, then that's going to come out in your art some way or another. And sometimes it will surprise you. Well, Bruce Springsteen is a fully initiated Catholic.
Okay.
So
he's in.
Well, he's in. I don't know if he practices his faith though. So that's the part that he needs to be responsible for. But he's baptized. He's received his first communion. He's been confirmed. And so unless he's secretly taking like a vow against the church or something. And even if you listen to him, he'll say there's no way he writes the way he does without his Catholic upbringing. I wrote an essay a few years ago in the Flannery O'Connor Review it's called Springsteen's Catechist, because guess who his favorite author is? Flannery O'Connor.
Really?
And he says it wasn't until he read her short stories that he really understood what original sin looked like. And shortly after that, he wrote Nebraska, which is probably lyrically his best album. He's written a song called A Good Man's Hard to Find. He's written a song called The River. On Nebraska, he talks about there's a meanness in this world, which is a direct quote from there ain't nothing but the meanness business about A Good Man's Hard to Find at the end when the Misfits speaking of Bobby Lee. So yeah, he's certainly influenced. That stuff as an evangelist. I'm the vicar for evangelization in my diocese. So I need to know what people are listening to. I need to know what people are watching, because a lot of times that's my entry point. I gave a paper at the Catholic Imagination Conference at University of Notre Dame back in late October, early November of 2024. And the title of my paper was How to Handle Serpents and Drink Poison and Not Be Harmed. Because if you remember at the end of Mark's gospel, that's what he tells the apostles. I think the poison and I think the serpents are the culture. It's the secular culture. If you are deeply grounded in your Catholic faith, that means you have a prayer life, you have a community, that you have accountability, and you're reading and you're studying, then I think you can go out to the culture, go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life, go and announce the gospel of the Lord, and you can handle the things of culture and not be harmed by them. But if you're not rooted in the sacramental life of the church, if you don't have a prayer life, if you don't have a community, that stuff will destroy you.
Shifting a little bit towards the idea of the Thomist part of Hillbilly Thomist.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, I did get a chance to talk to Father
Thomas Joseph
White, who wrote the foreword to your book. He was your doctoral thesis supervisor, somebody said advisor, one of the lead members of the hit band Hillbilly Thomist. We got a little bit into Thomism, but not too much. But I was wondering if you could kind of break apart what does Flannery mean when she calls herself a Hillbilly Thomist?
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Before you came, I figured you'd ask me this, and I actually marked it up. So page 81 in Habit of Being, this is in a letter to Robbie Macaulay, and she says, everyone who has read Wise Blood, that's her first novel, thinks I'm a hillbilly nihilist. So what's a nihilist? It's someone who believes in nothing. So there's no God, there's no meaning to life. So we basically have to be the ones who invent meaning, create meaning for ourselves, since there's no God, there's no ordering principle to the world. So everyone who has read Wise Blood thinks I'm a hillbilly nihilist, whereas I would like to create the impression over the television that I'm a hillbilly Thomist. What's interesting is she took no offense at the word hillbilly, which means an unsophisticated person, but philosophically, she had a real hard time with the nihilist because she was the furthest thing from a nihilist. She was a devout Catholic, daily mass goer, loved Our Lady. Even, I think when she was around, when did the Archdiocese of Atlanta emerge? I know it came out of Savannah, didn't it?
It did. And I meant to look this up before this because I want to say it was in the 50s.
Okay, because I think both dioceses had their own newspaper, and maybe it was the Georgia Bulletin, and however it worked out. She used to review books, literature, philosophy, and theology for her diocesan newspaper. Every 2 weeks, she was writing reviews in a diocesan newspaper while being like one of the hottest authors in the United States, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So the best in her field, but also faithful daughter of the church at the same time. And I think that's just wonderful.
Now, I'm no expert on this, but just in case, because the Southern Cross runs this podcast, I want to say the last issue of the Southern Cross takes this, like some of her writings and broadcasts them.
Cool.
That were, but I don't know the history of it.
Okay.
This, I want to say there is the Georgia Bulletin, and then there's the Southern Cross. I don't know if they were one at the time, but I do know they had like clippings where you can see like the originals.
Well, and she was part of both dioceses. So she's born here in the Diocese of Savannah, and then she went to high school and college in Milledgeville, and then up to Iowa, and then was in New York, Connecticut, and then came back to Milledgeville, which by that time, if there was a split, that was when it became the Archdiocese of Atlanta. So she's certainly a Georgia girl and has home in both of the dioceses in this great state. Also, talking about music, B-52s are from here. Cat Power, Sean Marshall's from here. Who else do I like? Indigo Girls are from here. And there's another band. There's a lot of good Georgia bands. I'll think of another one.
Okay.
Georgia Satellites.
Allman Brothers
there
from
we go.
Macon. Otis Redding is from Macon.
Come on.
Little Richard.
Really?
Yeah, from Macon. I lived in Macon, so I'm trying to hit the Alan Jackson, country singer.
Yeah, that's good. A lot of good music from Georgia.
A lot of Catholics want to get deeper into theology.
Yeah.
They go buy a copy of the Summa, and then they get way overwhelmed and give up. Is Flannery a good way for people to get into reading maybe heavier theology?
Yes, both. If you like literature, particularly Flannery O'Connor, the book will help you understand St. Thomas Aquinas and his philosophy. So metaphysics, what is reality? Epistemology, how do we come to know the world? How do we come to know ourselves? What is there to know? And then ethics, like how do we live? What is the good? Is it achievable? If it is, how do we get there? So the three major branches of philosophy. But if you like philosophy and you're saying, man, I really would like to get more into fiction, I don't know how to do this, and I've heard Flannery's good, then I think the book helps you that way too. So I'm trying to appeal to both audiences. Yeah. You know, when you sell a book to a publisher, you have to say, identify your audience. So it's kind of bold to say that the book does both, but I think it does. In my dissertation defense, it was May 31st, 2021, so it's the Feast of the Visitation of Our Lady. I remember it. And it was during COVID, so only one friend could get over, and the fact that she got over was a miracle anyway. She runs Theology of the Body Cleveland in my diocese, and it's great. Anyway, the dean of the philosophy faculty at that time asked me, do you think fiction, and in particular, well, he said, do you think fiction is an entry point for some people to do philosophy? And I think it is. I think it can get you asking the most important questions. And I think because O'Connor is so smart and she's so Catholic, and this was another question too, did she get her Thomism from all her reading of Thomist for 20 minutes every night, which she said she did, or by reading Etienne Gilson or Jacques Maritain? Or did she get it from her Catholic upbringing? And again, it's the both and. Mm-hmm. So her preconciliar formation, liturgically, but even more so catechetically, would have been highly Thomistic. But also her reading and her study was very Thomistic. And I think, I heard Eleanor Stump once say at a lecture that the best Thomist of all time was Dante. I thought that was pretty cool because he knew his philosophy and theology, but he put it in poetry, right? Or story. And I think O'Connor does something similar like that. Will she ever be Dante? I don't know, but she's pretty darn good. They say there are many good Catholic fiction writers that have come out of the United States, but only one great one, and that great one is Flannery.
Tying this into evangelization, because that's something I've thought about. I mean, as someone, I've appreciated Dante in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And Flannery O'Connor really, it's crazy to think, I mean, we're celebrating her 100th birthday, so it's not yesterday, but in Catholic terms, in historic terms,
Sure,
it's pretty close.
Yep.
I mean, you know people who knew her, or you've met people who knew her. And it's funny to me, like meeting Catholics around here. I was talking to my youth group. I work with a youth group at a local parish, and I was talking to one of the kids was telling me they love writing, and I was like, "Oh, have you ever read any Flannery O'Connor?" And they're like, "I've never heard of him." You know, it was a you know, kind of funny moment. But I'm like, okay, we really, it seems like, should be making sure that this is out there. So have you used her? Like, is there a way of evangelizing with Flannery O'Connor?
Yeah. So my first parish, just St. Mary's in Hudson, is pretty affluent parish, pretty well-educated parish. And I liked reading a lot before my mom died. Books I'd read in the summer, she'd be like, let me read that. And we would book club it together. And it was great. And then talk about the books we read. And so in the summertime at the parish, it kind of slowed down, but that was always a great time for reading for me, to do summer reading. So I would pick books to read, and I'd always do 2 Flannery O'Connor stories in my summer book club, which made me think I could, and people would come to book club, and particularly because they wanted to read some Flannery. So I did it there. It also helps in my writing to be part of, you know, the Flannery O'Connor Society and be able to publish works on reviewing things that she's, that have been written about her, or even engaging in discussion. But most recently, Bishop Barron, who runs Word on Fire, have you seen the Culture and Evangelization Journal? It comes out 4 times a year.
I have. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. So the next issue is dedicated to prayer. So there's a theme for each issue. The last one, I think, was courage.
Okay.
And I was asked to write a feature article on the prayer journal. So Flannery O'Connor's prayer journal here. Okay. So she wrote this when she was a student studying at Iowa, earning her MFA. Okay. This was only published back in 2013. Okay. And Bishop Barron wanted an article in the new issue about this book. And I wasn't given any parameters other than about 2,000 words. Cool. So one of the things as an evangelist that I've been studying is that Gen Z, so those born between 1996 and 2012, so you're a millennial, probably.
I am a millennial.
Okay. And I'm Gen X.
Okay.
And then the generation before us, baby boomer. And then before that, silent generation, before that, greatest generation. This is the first generation where women are leaving the church at a quicker rate than men. So that should cause grave alarm.
Oh, okay.
New York Times has written on it. National Catholic Register has written on it. Yeah. So that was my entry point with this, because I'm friends with a lot of women of that age, and they've shared with me some of their struggles. And I thought, Flannery was in her early 20s when she wrote that prayer journal. So maybe the piece I write is to show that it's possible to navigate those waters in prayer, because Flannery is very vulnerable, open, honest in her prayer journal. And I think she shows people how to pray through some of their struggles. Because oftentimes we think, well, if I'm struggling with this, or if I don't feel God in my life, he must have abandoned me, or the church must be against me somehow, so I have to leave. And she never did. And she wrestled through the hard stuff. She went through that Good Friday, or those Good Friday experiences. And then her faith, rather than becoming weaker, became stronger, in fact. But I don't think as a church we do that well with young people on the scale that we need to do it. There's certainly ministries that do it, but I think that's what Pope Francis means with accompaniment, like walking with people through those, the second conversion. Because the first conversion is like, I fell in love with Jesus. He changed my life. Hoorah, praise and worship. I'm feeling it. But the second, it's like after the honeymoon, then when you go through, man, okay, I feel like I'm stripped out here. I'm in the desert. What do I do? Do I cut and run? No. You stay through, because it's a purifying love now. And I think she's a great model for someone who's very bright and a wonderful artist and so serious about her faith. Did you see Wildcat?
I have seen
it. Okay, so my favorite scene in that whole film is when Liam Neeson plays the priest comes in to visit Flannery, played by Maya Hawke. And she wants to be a great Catholic and she wants to be a great artist at the same time. And there are not many models for that. Like, who are saints who have become or artists who have become canonized saints? Fra Angelico's beatified.
Okay.
But Michelangelo, no. Caravaggio killed a guy.
I was going to say, you hear bad stories about someone.
So she doesn't have models for, okay, if I'm smart and I'm an artist and I also want to be like a faithful Catholic, how do I do that? Is there anyone who's done that? And I think Flannery has. I think the further away we get from her death, the more important she becomes to the church in the 21st century and beyond. So she's very inspiring to me as a priest, but also one who loves art. And I think to some degree as an artist, and I bring artistry to my pastoral ministry, and I want to try things in terms of evangelization that maybe we haven't done before, but maybe we need to do. Yeah. And sometimes when you try something new, we've never done it this way before, and you get a lot of pushback. Someone like O'Connor says, no, is your conscience clear, and is what you're doing true and good? Then go, try it.
In many ways, she is a misfit, in her own time and space.
Yeah.
And she's got a lot of interesting quirks,
mm-hmm.
Like when you read about her and like that sometimes I think when it seems like as we're going through life, we're trying to grow in virtue, we're trying to grow in holiness, you feel weird, like you don't fit in. And it's nice because sometimes I wonder if like with saints of the past, they were so long ago that they're kind of things that made them eccentric, we've smoothed over, where it's
mm-hmm.
like, it doesn't, it's cool, that they, St. Augustine was this way or Jerome was grumpy.
Yeah.
But there's something about her being so recent that it seems like it's still palpable. Like she was a little weird.
Yeah.
And in a way that you might even meet her and be like, oh, she's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But that almost gives permission, I think, for us to feel that way. Because my experience as a teacher and a youth minister in the past has been people feel like they're struggling interiorly.
Yeah.
And they feel like they don't fit in. I wonder if she's a good patron for that.
Yeah, I think she's a great patron. I think none of us fit in.
Yeah. But no one says that, out loud, it seems.
Because of this thing called sin, and we're all in need of redemption. And when the bullies and the people who pick on those who want to be, calling people out all the time, usually they do that because it makes them feel better about themselves because they're covering up their own insecurity. Mm-hmm. And so I think what O'Connor does is she exposes our need for God, our need for grace. And I hope and I think she's in heaven. She was certainly a devout Catholic. She's on her way there. So if she's not, she's like just out of purgatory or something. But I think her art helps people be more human. Mm-hmm. And if you're being more human, then there's more of an openness to your own brokenness and to then allowing God to enter in to heal you.
Earlier you talked about like the saints choosing us, and you brought up that she's not a canonized saint, but she expressed that she's devout. I mean, and I know there have been some controversies, and then those controversies have been answered, and like the questions of her canonization opened or not. Yeah. But I mean, can a Catholic have it seems like part of the requirements for a person to get canonized is that there is some kind of circle of devotion around that person. Could a Catholic have some form of devotion to Flannery O'Connor? Is that a loaded kind of,
Well, I'm no canonist. My bishop is, so I better watch what I say. But I can say this, like, she's certainly my friend.
Okay.
And I talk to her.
Okay.
And I think she talks back.
Yeah.
And I call that the communion of saints somehow.
Yeah.
Not in the same way that I am absolutely certain that Mary Magdalene or St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Augustine are in heaven, but in the same way that my mom and dad are both deceased and I still chat with them.
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, when we celebrate All Saints' Day, it's not just the canonized saints, but those who are united with God in the promised land. And so, it's kind of like when you offer a funeral mass for someone, the mass is offered so that that person can be, like, if you pay attention to the prayers of the liturgy, sometimes they're like that they're in the Father's arms, or we're offering it for them so they can make their way there, because we can't be certain of where someone is. Yeah. The church is eaten. I mean, we certainly believe there's a hell and people can go there, but the church, interestingly, has never said who's there, never given one name, but we certainly know who's in heaven, and we can presume that people who have been really faithful their whole life are on their way there if they're not there yet. I think that's allowed. Before I went to write my dissertation, I think the last time I was in Milledgeville might have been the summer of 2019. Actually, I know it was. And I spent some time at O'Connor's grave, and I had asked for her help in writing this thing, and that I wanted to do good, and I wanted to do her right, but also the church right and philosophy right, and help me with this thing. So, I'm very happy that, like I said, I feel like she chose me within my vocation of priesthood to do some of this work, and I'm honored and humbled to do it, and it's fun.
It seems like the people that I meet that are into Flannery O'Connor
are weird.
Well, I mean, I'm getting maybe I'm getting increasingly weirder.
Mm-hmm. Shave half your beard like Philip Neri.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like there is a kind of like, it's good to feel that in the saints, because I think it makes us maybe feel a little better that we might actually be on the path, even though we're uncomfortable. Yeah, you don't want the airbrushed saint. No, and I think it's somewhere. I think you mentioned this in your book. I remember reading it in Mystery and Manners, where she does talk about, like, in becoming a good artist, there's like a deficiency in certain other areas that might develop. Yeah. And I wonder if virtue itself kind of does that. I mean, a virtue, it wouldn't be a deficiency, but it's almost like by growing in virtue, you might increasingly feel like a misfit, even though you're growing in virtue. And Flannery might be a good example of someone who was only progressing in her humanity, even though society might not have always recognized it, or her immediate peers. Yes. I'm going to find this quote for you because it's wonderful. Darn it. Oh, she says, vocation implies limitation, but it takes someone who practices an art to really understand that. Mm-hmm. So that's, if you're going to be great at being a basketball player or a musician or a writer, you're going to say a big old yes to whatever your craft is, but you're going to say a bunch of little no's to everything else, so that you can be great at this one thing. And that will make you look a little strange. Yeah. I think of Caitlin Clark, who's also Catholic, by the way. Okay. She used to go to the St. Newman club I don't know if I know who Caitlin Clark is. Caitlin Clark is the premier, like the best basketball player in the WNBA right now, and she went to Iowa for her undergrad and was Rookie of the Year this year. But she's also Catholic. And when all her friends were out doing whatever, she's practicing with her dad her shot, and she's got as good a shot as Steph Curry does right now. So, but when you're trying to be great at something, you do look weird. Yeah. When I was writing that, I was in Rome, and I decided I'm going to follow Flannery's model of writing. So every day, because she went to mass every morning and then had breakfast, and then she wrote 9 to noon every day. And then she'd take lunch, and then in the afternoon she'd take her appointments. She would read, she'd write letters to friends, visits with the doctor, all that. And then she said she was in bed every night by 9. So I thought, if it worked for Flannery, it worked for me. So every day from 9 to noon, except Sundays, she wrote Sundays, but she was down in lupus. I just went for it. And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, because 8-hour workday, but if you write for 3 hours a day, like, that's some significant work, and it's also exhausting. Some people can do 4 or 5. I can't, but I wrote that dissertation in 17 months. It was 138,000 words, and it was good. But that came out of like being highly disciplined, and people are like, "Oh, Ference is right, and don't disturb him." Well, yeah, don't disturb me, because I have a job to do, and this is what my bishops asked me to do for these next, for 2 years. So I did it. You've written another book, correct? Like another book's coming out? Yeah. So when I wrote this book, one of the things you have to do as an author is to get endorsements or blurbs, the front page of the book, like, "Oh, this is the greatest book I've ever read. It changed my life," stuff like that. So one of the guys I asked to write was a man named Joshua Wren, and he's a novelist. He's also the founder of Wise Blood Books. Okay.
And he's also the head of the MFA program at University of St. Thomas in Houston.
Okay.
So a really bright mind, a great writer, and pretty inventive with his publishing firm. Anyway, I asked him if he would endorse this book, and he did. Now, my original dissertation was 5 chapters, 138,000 words. Word on Fire wanted an 80,000 word book. So I had to do some serious cuts. So I removed chapter 2.
Okay.
So I kept the introductory chapter. I had to do some major revisions, but intro, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, boom, 80,000 words there. After the book was published, Joshua reached out to me and asked if I ever written anything on O'Connor's first novel, Wise Blood. And I said, in fact, my second chapter, which is 25,000 words, I said, is all on O'Connor and modernity, like Etienne Gilson, Jacques Maritain, and Gabriel Marcel, and Guardini a bit too. So I said, yeah, I wrote that. I could send it to you. Just don't share it too much because, it's not published yet. So he used it for his class. And then at the end of the semester, he said, hey, at Wise Blood, we have a series of long essays. They're little books, like 60 to 100 pages called monographs. He said, could we publish that? I'm like, are you asking me if I could get 2 books out of my dissertation? And he said, yeah. So sure. So the book is entitled, No One Was Even Looking at the Sky, which is a line from Wise Blood. And then the subtitle or the title, I don't know how we're going to frame it, is Flannery O'Connor and Modernity. That will come out August 26th with Wise Blood Books. I was working with a publisher this week. They're working on review copies, and I'm hoping to have a book launch on the Feast of St. Augustine, August 28th, back in my hometown of Cleveland. Live music, beer, book signing.
It's a great
that's what we do. I mean, I'm a celibate man. I have no idea what it's like to have a child, but when you write a book, it's kind of like you're really proud of this thing. You worked hard on it. It was painful. And I talked to one of my colleagues, Kayla, at the downtown offices. I'm like, I don't mean to offend you at all. I know you're a mother and you've had, you've given birth, but she goes, no, because she creates a lot of the beautiful things that come out from our diocese in terms of graphics and design. She's like, no, I understand. It's kind of like that. I'm like, okay, good. I can say that then. Yeah.
Now, if someone wanted to read that, would they need to read Wise Blood first, or would this be a tool in understanding Wise Blood?
Well, I've not met many people who have read Wise Blood the first time and said, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. That's a great book. Yeah. It's one of those that I kind of know something was happening there, but I think it takes work. I also think it's best to read books with other people. The intersubjectivity, like read a book with a friend, say, hey, let's read these chapters. We'll get together. I'm reading Crime and Punishment with a friend right now. So we read one part at a time. It's about 80, 100 pages. And then you just have someone to talk it over with. It's better than just, I read that and didn't understand it. Like talk it out, think through it. It's helpful that way. Yeah.
Something I've noticed in my marriage, even though me and my wife, it's weird because it's like you can know a truth and you experience it and then still walk away. The most rich parts of our marriage have been when we've read something together.
Yeah.
Because you do. I mean, we had to stop. We were doing Bible in a year together, and we had to stop because we were staying up too late. It sounds like so pious, but it's just funny. We read Chesterton's the Pleasure of Chasing After One's Hat. Is that what it's called? Something like that. Is this essay together, and we just laughed and laughed together. I mean, it was just a very rich experience. And we've read A Good Man Is Hard to Find together, and the Good Country People. Yeah. And when we read Good Country to People together, that was like a big change in me understanding Flannery, I think, because it was like, that was the first time I got hit by it. And it was something about doing it together that really caused
intersubjectivity. It's why Bible study is important because the text is there, and then you're bringing your own experience to the text and other people's perspectives, and they may be able to tease out things that you didn't see there, and it's so helpful. I strongly recommend doing that.
So just to wrap it up then, someone's like, cool, I've listened to this entire episode of It's Catholic Y'all. It's blown my mind. I bought the book, but as it's shipping to my house, me and my friend are going to read one Flannery O'Connor short story. I'm sure that's like the number one question you could ask. Where to start? What's the first one if someone's a complete
newbie? So it depends who you are.
Okay.
My mother did not like Flannery O'Connor, and she was a pretty good reader. And I know that's true of a lot of people until she was dying of cancer. Then she started understanding her. Okay. In fact, the nuns that ran the cancer home, the Hawthorne Dominicans, would give Flannery a hard time because of the darkness and the grotesque nature of her stories. And she said, wait a second, what do you do all day? You take care of dying cancer patients. Don't you see Christ in them? They're like, oh. So maybe the stories aren't a great place to start. I think they are. I think that's her best work. It's her most refined work. It's her most developed work. So she's best as a short story writer. She also has 2 novels, Wise Blood and The Violent Bear It Away. They're tricky. I think The Violent Bear It Away is a little more accessible. Wise Blood's kooky. John Ford made a film about it back in 1979, so you can watch that. And then she started on a third one, Why the Heathen Rage. And Jessica Houghton Wilson tried to, it was never finished, but she tried to make sense out of it. And that's in a new book that came out this past year. That's interesting. I also think for many people, I talked to a woman after Mass today who said her habit of being, her letters, that's what made her really understand her. Okay. And I think too, for me, I got to understand her as a person, which helped me better understand her art. So I'd start with the stories, but then supplement it with her letters. And then Mystery and Manners is a collection of her essays. And she would go on the circuit for a bit and give lectures at universities. So we have that. And then I think the prayer journal is so helpful. I think, again, particularly for college age people, this would be wonderful because she was in her early 20s when she wrote this, and it helps you understand how to pray, I think. Yeah. Now, certainly you could read Jacques Philippe and you could read, Father Boniface Hicks or something. But I like Flannery. Yeah. People are like, I'm a Dorothy Day Catholic. Well, I'm a Flannery Catholic. Yeah. Let me read from O'Connor's prayer journal. I'll read to you my favorite entry, which is the very last entry, and then we'll pray a glory be.
Okay.
Now, why I like this is she does not hide anything from the Lord, and she tells him what's really going on in her heart. My thoughts are so far away from God, he might as well not have made me. And the feeling I egg up writing here lasts approximately a half hour and seems a sham. I don't want any of this artificial, superficial feeling stimulated by the choir. Today, I have proved myself a glutton for Scotch oatmeal cookies and erotic thought. There is nothing left to say of me. And I like that because that's where she was in her life, and she was sharing that with the Lord. Yeah. And what does he want? He wants our hearts, especially when we're struggling. So may we be as vulnerable with the Lord as she was there. And of course, she lived another 15 years and developed her prayer from there. So with that, glory be to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Well, thank you, Father. Thank you for taking the time to do the podcast with us, for talking about Flannery O'Connor, sharing your books, and being a priest who's so interested in this. I don't know if at the events there's like hundreds of priests out there, and you're just one among millions, but I don't know.
There's only a few of us.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm happy that you are playing that role.
Thank you. I am too. And Patrick, this was fun being on Catholic Y'all. I'm going to tell my friends at home up north I was on Catholic Y'all. Do you say Catholic Y'all or Catholic Y'all? Yeah. Wait, it's Catholic Y'all.
It's Catholic Y'all.
Oh.
But I feel like Southerners love dropping letters and words.
I put the sticker on my Nell jeans, so I'm going to be walking through the airport and be like, it's Catholic Y'all.
They're going to be like, wow, word on fire. What's that? It's Catholic Y'all is what we're familiar with. So thank you for being here with us, Father.
You're welcome. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
This has been an episode of It's Catholic Y'all. Visit us at diosav.org or on our Diosav social media platforms for more.